The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The City of La Quinta, Laser Focused on Resident Services. I'm Kimberly, and today I will be your host. Before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to quickly run through the GoToWebinar interface in case some of you are not familiar with it. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be watching questions. Some of them I may answer via the chat box. Others I will hold for our speakers. We'll also do 2 stops for questions, once during the presentation and once before we end for the day. The presentation looks best in full screen mode, so you'll want to enable that by clicking the full screen option, which is the top right-hand side of your control panel next to the X button. Finally, we're recording and we will post it to our website. You will get an email from me with a link to that recording so you can watch it again or pass it along. Today, we're very lucky to have 2 presenters, Monica Radeva, CMC, City Clerk of the City of La Quinta. She's worked at the city for 14 years and she's been the clerk for 7. And Jamie Dunn, who's our VP of Sales. For the last 2 decades, Jamie's helped public sector agencies invest in ECM. I wanted to start out today with a brief introduction about the concept of government as a service. I really think that this is the next evolution of the typical siloed functions, processes, and roles that traditionally exist within government. And I think Monica in particular, La Quinta, is a good example of a municipality that's pushed past those silos and those limited processes and truly are opening government or offering government as a service. Some IT departments are actually moving the management of specific applications to other departments. So they're going from centralized to decentralized. I think those of you on the call probably remember when they were decentralized and went to centralized. So again, there's this constant evolution. Laserfiche acts as a repository of information, integrative middleware, and an enterprise system of record, and finally, even a trusted system. And it enables municipalities to centralize their processes, functions, and communications so that citizens can truly have the offering of government as a service and a one-stop shop experience. So it's a single platform that aims to address the rising complexity of service delivery because they're only ever getting more public records requests. You're only ever having more meetings. It's never less, it's always more. So it allows government departments, agencies, and service organizations to offer these services through a single platform. I came across this interesting study from Pew Research about trusting government. Trusting government, in particular the federal government, is at all-time lows. It's about 22%. So if you look at the graph you've got in front of you, on the y-axis are the percentages, and the x-axis are the time where we are in space. And then the top part is the administrations. So it's not great in terms of federal government. However, Americans trust in their state and local governments more than in their federal governments. And they trust them to handle problems under their purview. And right now, municipalities are at a 66 trust rate. State governments are at a 57% trust rate. So I guess my question is, how do agencies proceed? By continuing to foster transparency and accountability by activities such as, open city council meetings, or like Monica's going to show you today, public records requests. Just quickly, I wanted to go over a little bit about Gartner. Gartner is an analyst group, and they kind of give organizations within a specific vertical market their report card. So this is the report card for, I think, last year. They do this report every 2 years. It's called the Magic Quadrant. You'll notice that Laserfiche is considered a visionary. And they're considered a visionary because of the business process tools. They can be used in the cloud, they can be used in a hybrid, they can be used on premise. And it includes things like forms, reporting, and dashboarding. And they're configurable and customizable. Also, the channel is really strong. Hopefully, if you're a CPS partner, you're happy with us, or if you're working with another partner, you're happy with your partner, because, as I said, the Gartner ranks the channel as strong. And finally, Laserfiche has, the 3 offerings: the cloud offering, the hybrid architecture offering, and the on-premise offering. So no matter how you want to host or run your system, you have a choice. So now it's time to hand our presentation over to our rockstar client, Monica.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. I'm Monica Rodiva. I am the city clerk for the city of La Quinta. And I just want to make a correction. I know Kimberly said that I've been the city clerk for 7 years, but I've only been with the clerk's office for 7 years, clerk for about 4.5 at this point. So I want to make sure everything's correct for the record. So let's start with some context. I know that the majority of the audience is from municipal government, so I thought it would be helpful to provide some detail about the economic and operational environment specific to La Quinta. The adverse impact on the economy caused by the 2007-2008 housing market recession led to several unprecedented circumstances for us. The dissolution of the redevelopment agencies, which took away a substantial revenue source for the city. And the economic downturn also caused a 25% reduction in workforce in 2013. And unfortunately, these challenging times were also coupled with La Quinta losing its longtime city manager. So we needed to figure out a way to continue to provide the same level of services with less fiscal and staffing resources. I'm sure you've all heard this 1,000 times before. How do we provide more with less? These unfortunate and unprecedented circumstances pushed the city into the era of technology, innovation, and collaboration. The city looked into achieving efficiencies and removing redundancies through automation, streamlining processes, and improving interdepartmental communications and collaborations. Generally, public agencies operate under silos. Departments tend to function independently of each other, which oftentimes results in redundant functions for each department due to decentralized processing, review, and approvals of permits and projects. For example, if a resident or a developer came to City Hall to pull permits, they would need to go to multiple counters to visit every department separately. Planning, engineering, and building had their own counters. And then they would need to go to finance to submit their payment. La Quinta sought to improve this experience, and the idea was to create the hub, a one-stop shop customer service center. Customers would come to only one counter, and that counter can provide all services, including taking in payments. And payments would no longer be limited to cash or check. We wanted to move into the 21st century and allow people to use credit cards. To make this possible, the city needed to implement a permitting software that was multifunctional and could meet the needs of all departments. And after an extensive request for proposals and qualifications vetting process and proof of capabilities interviews, La Quinta selected Trackit, which was implemented in 2014. The formation of the hub was twofold. As I just mentioned, one was the implementation of the citywide permitting software, and the second part was the physical relocation of building, planning, and engineering staff into a one-stop shop customer service center. Both of these factors combined is what helped us shed the silos and allow the departments to integrate and work together towards a common goal. This was vital in getting the buy-in from the departments and staff in the city's efforts to streamline processes and to go digital. Now, the successful implementation of the hub naturally led staff to seek additional improvements, one of which was the digitization and centralization of the city's records management. The objective here was to go paperless and make the city's records available online, just like we had done with our permits. We had an online portal. People no longer needed to come to the counter to submit their applications. That option was available to them to do at home, from the comfort of their home, from their computer, and we wanted to do the same with records. So the right staff and the right environment were in place for this idea to become a reality. A little bit of background about myself. During my 14-year tenure with the city, I worked for several years in the planning department, which in 2013 was merged with the building and safety department and became the community development. This incorporated planning, building, housing, code compliance, and emergency services. And I was the point person for fulfilling public records requests for planning and then subsequently for building. And I was a big proponent for going digital. It was a challenge to keep filing rooms organized. My search engine oftentimes for finding files was reading file labels in the filing room and having to go to the basement to search for plans. And having gone through the Trackit implementation, there was no question that records management needed to be transitioned to a digital platform. So we started with building permits, then building plans, moved over to planning, engineering, and now many other records citywide. Many departments, as we initiated this effort 7 years ago or over 7 years ago, many departments had already started their own automation efforts, but again, they were decentralized without a collective and collaborative approach citywide. So this is what Laserfish made possible for us. It took us 7 years to get all of the building permits and plans scanned, a lot of planning records, transitioned the engineering archive from a non-secured portal on the city's website to a custom search form in WebLink. And we're now working on transitioning over the capital improvement projects and many other random records that are extremely helpful. Now I'm going to share my screen. Just want to confirm, can everybody see our Laserfish desktop client?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you can see,
we can actually see your script. We need to see your other screen, I'm guessing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
There we go. Perfect.
There it is.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try to move these over. Okay. As you can see, we have a variety of records citywide, and we continue to add to them every single day. Laserfish, our Laserfish repository contains only permanent records that, pursuant to our records retention schedule, there are no temporary records. So anything that's in here we will be holding on forever. Not all folders that you see here are made available to the public through our web link portal. Only some of them are, because there are some records that are proprietary and require certain authorizations and approvals before they can be released, or we need to review the records and apply certain redactions pursuant to the California Public Records Act before we can release them. But the majority are. As you can see, we have our standard records consisting of the City Council agenda, minutes, ordinances, resolutions, as well as our boards and commission records. The same thing, we have the agenda, the minutes, the resolutions. We have our financial records, all of the budgets, the comprehensive annual reports, the financial statements, which are often requested through public records requests. We have our agreements. A few years ago, we added our insurance policies, which was extremely helpful for our finance department because they're oftentimes requested for the annual audits that the city needs to complete. And by adding them to Laserfish, it allowed staff or even the auditors to simply access them through our web portal independently without any staff involvement. Our traffic division was super excited when we showed our progress with our permits and projects. So they opted in and they added all of their traffic signal records. We have the maintenance logs, the synchronization records, as well as the as-built plans, which oftentimes get requested due to traffic accidents that occur in the city, and the insurance companies contact us for those. And again, we can easily provide them with a link. And most notable would be our projects and permits. So we have, as I mentioned, our building planning and engineering combined in here. Our building plans are in a separate folder because they are proprietary, and this folder is restricted, where the project and the permits folder is available through our web link portal. So why is this important? Having this centralized system allowed the city clerk's office 5 years ago to take on fulfilling records requests independently without having to forward the request to the individual departments, because we had the records available at our fingertips. This has certainly assisted us with the increased records requests that we're receiving, especially during the pandemic. Our number has doubled over the last couple of years. And this has really allowed us to stay on top and be able to complete it timely and very easy. Before I move over, so this is the desktop version that the city clerk's office has access to, and this is how we maintain the repository. The public and the staff access the repository through the web link portal. And I'd like to switch over to that. But before I do, I want to pause and see if there's any questions at this time.
No, Monica, there are no questions.
Perfect. Okay, great. So our web link repository has 2 access points. One is for the public, and if you access it, you're going to be directed to our landing page, which we have tried to make it user-friendly and include every single department. So at a glance, you can easily navigate between whether or not you're looking for building records, planning, public works. We've also incorporated other resources that are not drawing from the city's Laserfish repository. For example, the human resources page has a link to the city's employment opportunities, which takes you to an outside website, the employment benefits, which take you to the city's website, and etc. Of course, again, we have the city council records. All of this information can be searched for either through the city's landing page, or the user has the option to click the browse button and go to the folder structure if that is their preferred method of searching. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use the custom web links that the custom search links that we have created to facilitate the user searches. What I'd like to point out is this is the public portal, and as you can see, through the browse function, we only have access to those limited number of folders that are not restricted versus the entire repository, which is quite a bit more. Going back to the web link portal, if we click on the logo, that would ends up taking us to the landing page. The most requested record for us is building permits and plans. And Laserfish, this web link has been critical for us to make things easy. Again, we no longer need to go to a filing room to pull out a paper file. We don't need to scan the permits because they're already in Laserfish. And then the plans are also available for us to search as well with a keystroke. So going to the building permits and plans custom search link, you can just type in an address and click submit. And you can see that I get 3 results for this particular address. This particular property has pulled a block wall permit, a residential pool permit, and a single family dwelling permit. Now, if I am logged in as an employee, I will see a different search. So this is the employee portal. And if I go under the browse button, I can now see that I see all of the folders that are in the Laserfish repository, quite a bit more. And again, if I access that same search link and I type in the address and click submit, I now get 9 results, not 3, because 4 of those results, 4 of the documents that are in this particular property folder are restricted. The trust calculations would require an approval from the engineer, as well as the structural calculations. We would need a release form before we can release them to the requester. And then we can see that there are several plans here for this particular property. This is the plan for the single family dwelling permit when the property was constructed. These documents, if the resident is at City Hall, we notify the resident that they can come and view these documents at the public counter. But if they do want copies, they will need to obtain approvals and authorizations. And I have a copy of an email that I can share with you on how we notify them. So we basically let them know that the documents are available through WebLink, but if they're requesting permits, we take a copy of the engineer or the architect that is on file. We provide them with a copy with the form that they need to fill out, and we give them instructions on what they need to submit, so we can either mail that record to them on a flash drive or they can come and pick it up. And I'm going to go through demonstrating the search capabilities for the other departments. So this is for building. If we go back to our custom search forms, one of the most requested records for planning is generally specific plans and sign programs, because tenants tend to leave commercial centers, or tenants would like to do tenant improvements, or there's new tenants and they want to, add new signs or remove signs. And they need to know what the requirements and guidelines are for that particular shopping center. Our specific plans were scanned and added to the Laserfish repository. And to aid the search, because each specific plan is specific either to a residential or commercial development, we made a list of the project name. So as you can see, we have a list of every single development in the city. So if the the resident or the user is familiar with the name of the development, they can simply click on the name of the development and click submit, and that particular record will come up. So Palmia is a residential development. For this particular example, I'm going to use a commercial development. So we're going to click on Jefferson Plaza, click submit, and the folder with the records will come up. On this particular record, we thought it was going to be most useful to apply the metadata for the searchability to the folder structure versus the individual document, because specific plans and sign programs tend to get amended over periods of time. So for this particular example, we can see that the original specific plan was approved in 1996, and there were subsequent amendments in 1999 and 2014. So by adding the metadata and directing the search form to search at the folder level, we were able to add as many documents as there were that were related to this particular development. So if we click on this particular document, it will take us to the document in Laserfish. But what we also thought was going to be super useful is generally people are request copies of the approvals that led to this particular specific plan. So we created document relationships to that particular document, to the resolutions and the minutes and the staff report from the public meeting that this was approved at. So if I click on this resolution, it will take me again to that particular document in the Laserfish repository. Even though this is under the resolutions folder, I can easily navigate between all of the information that is in Laserfish just with one click, not having to go back out to the folder structure and not having to conduct any additional searches. Again, if I click on the minutes, if I wanted to find out what the discussion was, I will be taken directly to that document. And if I wanted to look at the subsequent approvals and amendments for this particular specific plan, I can click on the amendment 1, for example. And again, if I scroll down, I will be taken to the approvals and public documents that approved that particular amendment. So again, very easy to navigate between all of the information that is in Laserfish. If we wanted to make this super easy, so if a resident or a developer didn't know the name of the shopping center, they wouldn't know which one to pick, but oftentimes they might know what major tenants are in that development. So for example, I want to build, or I want to go into a vacant building that is next to Smart and Final, for example. So we created a list of all of the major developments. We selected 2 or 3 major tenants from each commercial development, and we added them. And again, we added that information to the metadata. So if I click Smart and Final, then I get the same search and I can navigate directly to that as well. Going back to our landing page, the sign programs work in a similar fashion. I'm not going to go through an example, but again, we have a list of major tenants that the user can select from if they don't know what the name of the commercial center is. Or if they do, they can select the name of the commercial center itself and click submit. Moving on to our engineering archive. So our engineering archive was already available on the city's websites, but it wasn't secured. The way the search form worked through the city's website, it was allowing the users to directly look into the city's servers, which our IT department was very concerned about because it allowed, it increased our risk exposure from being hacked. So by moving that entire repository into Laserfish and being able to recreate the same search form through Laserfish WebLink, created that additional security because this is at its own secured server and it is not connected to the city's network in any way. The engineer archive is searchable in very much the same manner as building permits and the planning records. Again, we evaluate each record and we determine what the most useful information would be for people to search from. Again, if you know the name of the development, you can just type it in. So for example, we have a cactus flower residential development. I can type that into the search form, and underneath each field, we explain what information you can use to search. So in this particular instance, the alpha description can include either the track number, the parcel number, the street name, or the project name. So if I enter cactus flower and hit submit, I can see that I come up with quite a bit of maps that are available for this particular residential development. The metadata includes additional information. We can see that the name is cactus flower, but we can also see what kind of plan it is. This is specifically on-site street plans. We can see that there are several of those. We also see that there are off-site street improvement plans. We see that there's a drainage and storm drains plans. We see that there's grading, track map. So if I know specifically, if I'm an engineer and I know specifically what I'm looking for, I can go under the plan description and just select the type of plan that I'm looking for. So now I'm utilizing a 2 search factor instead of just 1. And if I add that and click submit, now my results are only 1. So you're able to drill down and really make concentrate your search, so you're not having to look through thousands of documents or hundreds of documents. You can keep drilling down and make that even more specific and easy to locate records. That's not coming from me, right? That basically, again, just going, we have notices of pendency available. So if anyone is interested, if anyone is going through a resale, we get these requested quite often. If anyone is interested, is going through a resale and there is a pendency on their property, they can come in and type in an address just like with the building permits and click submit, and that document will come up. And that basically concludes the demonstration on the web link. Again, the same documents would be available through the search function, through the folder structure, if you know exactly what you're looking for, but the custom search forms are much easier to use. Another extremely useful tool that CPS was able to provide to us when we were going through this automation process was we wanted a way to be able to track agreements and insurance, because we noticed that staff didn't have the tools to track when agreements were expiring, when insurance were current, and we wanted a better way to be able to provide advance notices to staff either 30 or 60 days in advance and let them know, hey, this agreement is expiring. Are you interested in either renewing it, or we need to terminate it, and perhaps now you're getting these services through another vendor. As you can see, our agreement folder is subdivided with multiple subfolders. We have our active agreements, which is available to the public. Our expired agreements are not. Our development agreements are available to the public, and our subdivision improvement agreements are also available to the public. The way CPS helped us build a workflow that looked into the active agreements folder, and particularly into the metadata that we apply to each agreement when we enter it in Laserfish. So if we look at particularly this agreement, this is our Viatron Systems agreement, who was our scanning vendor as we were going through the digitization process, we can see that we've had multiple agreements with them. However, each agreement has its own metadata. which includes the name of the vendor, who the project manager is, and then it has the effective and the expiration date for each agreement. And the workflow looks into this particular field. If the agreement, the status is, there's a formula on how the status is calculated. So based on the expiration date, the status is triggered, and that determines whether or not this agreement would show up on the report. If the agreement is expired, we assign it an expired tag, and then workflow knows not to add that to the agreement list. So only the current agreement, as you can see, that does not have the tag, the expired tag, would be subject to workflow. And then at the time when this is about to expire, our current agreement would be expiring a year from now, then the status will change from current to either due in 60 days or due in 30 days, and it will show up on that report. The report is easily available for us to run through the desktop client, although it can be run through the workflow link. But we had easy to use shortcuts added to our ribbon. And as you can see, if I hover over my first one, that is my La Quinta agreements report. And if I click it, it just takes me and asks me if I want to run this report, and I say yes. And then within about a minute, I get an email in my inbox that looks like this. And as you can see, it is generated from Laserfish, and it includes a PDF copy of the report. And the same information is also provided into the body of the email. As you can see, each record includes a link, which if I can click, it takes me directly to that particular agreement in Laserfish. So if I'm the project manager and I receive this email from staff saying, hey, you have an agreement that is about to expire. I'm sorry, where's my email? Okay, that is about to expire. It's due in 30 days. I want to take a look at it, and then I want to know whether or not I have the ability to extend it, or if I'm going to have to execute a new agreement. The project manager is listed right underneath each of the records. And again, the link takes me directly to that record. And the PDF works very much the same way as the email. If I click on the link, it will take me directly to that record. We have the same report available for insurances. We keep all prior and current insurances in the agreement folder. Again, workflow looks at the same folder. So I have a shortcut for that particular workflow again in Laserfish, and the same way I can click it and I will get the same email for insurances that shows me what insurances are either expired or coming up. So for example, there's 85 documents that are coming up. This first one is due in 30 days. And again, if I am the project manager for this particular insurance, so if I click on that document, it's going to take me directly to the document if I want to look at it and determine who I need to contact and what kind of insurance exactly I need to obtain. What is interesting about the insurance is, or what is worth noting here, is that there are several different kinds of insurance, right? We require general liability. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my email. Okay, we require general liability, several different endorsements, the additional insured endorsement, the primary and non-contributory. We require auto. Depending on the type of agreement, every agreement would require different kinds of insurance coverage. And as you can see, workflow looks into all of those coverages and provides us an update. So this particular insurance still has cyber liability current through September of 2022, but we can see that the workers' compensation and then a few of the other coverages are coming up to be due and it will be expired either in 30 or 60 days. So this was really important for us as we were creating that. We wanted to provide not only the ability to provide the notifications to staff, but also the ease and when they looked at that email, they knew exactly what they needed to do instead of having to figure it out on their own. That concludes my overview of the reports that we have created. One thing I wanted to point out is CPS was extremely helpful when we were going through our digitization process. Obviously, you can imagine we have scanned thousands and thousands of permits. I think we have about 9,000 or maybe 10,000 different plans, and that's for building alone. We have, 70,000 plans for the engineering archive and, hundreds of thousands of permits, obviously, for the building permits, which are nicely organized under our building permits by street addresses. So each street has its own alphabetical street folder, then it's by street name, and then it's by the street number. This took a lot of effort when we would send 500 boxes to our scanning company, and they would scan everything, and then they would scan every record and save it by the permit number, which was listed on the individual permit, depending on what kind of permit type it was. In this particular instance, the permit number is here in this upper right-hand corner. But that would have taken, doing this manually would not have been possible. So what CPS was able to assist us with is we created basically an incoming building permits folder where we would transfer the Laserfish briefcase once we received it from the scanning company. Obviously, it's blank now because we've completed that effort, but there would be, 10,000 documents in there that looked just like this, and then we would provide CPS with a spreadsheet that contained the building permits number and then the address, and they were able to create a workflow that looked into that database and then looked into the incoming building permits folder and matched the name of the document to the database that we gave them. And based on that information, it automatically routed the document into its particular street folder if there was one that already existed. And if there wasn't one, a street folder was created, and then it automatically applied the metadata and filled in the data from that database. So that made the process extremely easy. Literally in a matter of seconds, all 10,000 permits would be transferred. Each one of our permits, we performed 100% quality control to make sure that it was transferred to the right folder, that the metadata was correct, that there were no errors. And at that time, we had hundreds of boxes sitting around, and it begged the question, what is the next step of our digitization? What are we going to do with all this paper that we have now taken the time to pull from the filing rooms, index, send it for scanning? We weren't going to put it back on those shelves, because having this, the question was, would anybody get up to go to a dusty filing room to look for a building permit, or would anybody go down to the basement to look for a building plan when all I have to do is type in an address in WebLink and be able to pull that information? And the answer was no. So we sought out the help of and guidance of CPS, and after a year worth of research, we were able to procure a trusted backup system. So now our laserfish repository is backed up in accordance with California state guidelines. And that allowed us to recognize the scanned records in our laserfish archive as the originals, and the paper copies became, and the paper permits basically became a copy of the originals. And we have destroyed all of our paper records because the originals now are safely tucked in our laserfish repository. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll turn it over to our hosts.
I am going to make Jamie the presenter, as he has a brief part to add, and then we'll take questions. Please remember to use the question box so I see them, and I've got some really good ones coming up, so please stay for the question section. Hi, Jamie.
All righty, thank you, everybody. Great presentation there, Monica. Everybody can see my screen, I'm hoping?
Yes.
So we're going to go ahead and just take a couple minutes and talk about the CPS SysCheck process. The SysCheck process is an opportunity really just to take a deep dive into your Laserfish repository. I guess you can kind of consider it like a health check. So if you've had a 1-year system, or if you've had your system for 15 years, it's a really good opportunity for us to get just a really good brush over on things such as like your volumes. We'll look at the back end and see how that's being stored. We'll also be looking at your metadata. Sometimes metadata doesn't necessarily make sense if it was 10 years ago. We'll also be looking at trends of growth. So as you know, there's departments that sometimes have turnover, growth ends up not happening, and then other departments that are growing tremendously. We'll also be looking at automation, any automation that has been involved and included into your system. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look at just a little bit of our findings, just some sample reports that we've done previously. This one's pretty interesting. It's going to show you some template information for the past 12 years. And if you take a look, just looking at like business licenses. So 2010, about 6,700 and 6,500. It took a little bit of a drop, and then it doubled in 2014, and then doubled again. So that's just interesting information that we can go back to the department and ask them, what is it that happened where something just made it just bump up so much? Maybe with building docs, you look down here and we were doing 40,000, then 23, then there's a significant drop. Again, with COVID information, we got to see some stats really get adjusted, which was interesting, but we can take this data back to each of the departments and the organization and see how we can make information more efficient, and being able to see the departments just being able to go from start to finish, and being consistent in some of their templates. We'd also be looking at documents by department. Like we said, different templates that are used. You'll see the business license, city clerks. These are all departments or templates that are being used frequently, but you get down to the bottom of the list and you're going to have some finance, public works. Some of these templates are not being used. A good opportunity to maybe clean up the template pool. If there's no reason to have templates that are not being used anymore, we can go ahead and make the recommendation to get rid of them. Some more template management. With some of the metadata fields, we've seen templates that have had 25 metadata fields, maybe just 2. Maybe that doesn't make sense anymore. So it's a great opportunity to go back into the system. We can do a little bit of analyzing for you and seeing if this really makes sense anymore. If not, we can fix it. With templates, obviously there's required fields. We can run reports seeing that there's certain information that people might be able to search on and they're not able to because it wasn't put in the template. So we're going to go ahead and make that metadata field a required field, run a report, see how many we have where we have missing information. If it's something that we can populate systematically utilizing workflow, we would go ahead and do that. If for any reason it wasn't, we've got to do the old school kind of point and click, well, then that's what we would have to do. So naming conventions. I'm sure we've all seen very, very interesting naming conventions, either at the workplace or at home from your kid. But there's always those naming conventions that we really just want to create a consistency in naming convention, putting relevant data in the document name. It's really important, as you saw with Monica, seeing files that are being displayed to the public, make the document name something that's understandable, that they're going to have some information regarding that actual document. Folder organization as well. We did get an opportunity to see the City of La Quinta's folder structure there, which was very well organized. There are sometimes we do open up certain folder structures and see many areas of improvement. As you saw too, there are workflows that we can incorporate to auto file documents as well, that you just got to change around like an incoming folder for your foldering structure. And again, we saw that with Monica's folder structure, which was great. So it's really important just have that consistent naming and have that consistent organization within the repository. So now that everything's all done and we do the sys check, what happens at that point? We don't just leave. We did not earn the 2022 Customer Choice Award from Laserfish by just selling and deploying. That's not what we do. We're going to provide a detailed report with all of our findings, all of our recommendations of exactly what we have seen in the past and what we recommend that we could possibly do in the future. We'll also be providing documentation on your workflows and business processes that have came up in the last. And the best part is that we're also going to be doing continued follow-up on the progress as well. It's always great when we can do a sit down and do a health check on the system, but the real power of it is in 6 months, do we make those recommendations? Do we do those changes? So this is just a little blip into the CPS SysCheck process. And with that being said, I will go ahead and give it back to Kimberly.
And I will take it back. And now we are ready for questions. Let me just. Okay, so it looks like we have several, so this should be fun. Monica, who project managed, I guess, the role or who individual, this entire effort?
It was mainly me. I worked in collaboration with people in other departments, but I had for the building, particularly, I'm going to give a couple examples. So just to kind of put it into context. So for the building effort, which was huge, we were lucky enough that we had a retired building permit tech employee that was willing to come and work for us part-time, which made it super helpful because she already knew and understood the records like the back of her hand. Because what we wanted to do is we didn't want to just scan a bunch of non-records or send to the scanning company a bunch of files that didn't make sense. We wanted like clean and concise records. So her job was to literally go through every single file folder in the filing room, clean it up, organize it in the same manner, and then put it in a box and, you know, log it into an Excel spreadsheet. And it was just that manual. And she worked on that for literally 3.5 years. She went through every single building plan and every single building permit. But I was the one who did, basically, I was the point of contact for the clerk's office. So to answer the question is the clerk's office was in charge of the digitization effort. And the clerk's office also manages the repository, how it functions, the Laserfish repository, how it functions. So we worked with staff. I would sit down and have meetings with several staff members and explain, listen, we can do a custom search form, we can scan this is how we can make it available. And then start with one record, show the progress, then people would get excited, and then, you know, get them, okay, let's do the next one, let's do the next one, let's do the next one. For every project, I would have a point person in that department that I worked with specifically. So we would have either bi-weekly or monthly meetings, depending on how quickly they could go through the records, and then we would review the progress. So for example, if we talk about the specific plan, I worked with one of the planners in that department, because the research to find out the different approvals and which documents were related to each particular specific plan took about a year. And it took a lot of detailed notes, and then sitting down with that person and making sure that we're linking the right documents, verifying all the information. But at the time, I wasn't the city clerk, I was the deputy city clerk. And like I said, I was lucky to be working with a team that was extremely knowledgeable of the records. We did utilize, to an extent, temp services, and that was okay. But for the preparation of the records before they were sent to be scanned, having an internal staff member was what was needed. A temp didn't quite fit the needs for us. We utilized temps when we were conducting the quality control after the records were returned from the scanning company and were transferred into Laserfish. So before we used the workflow to put them into the different folders, we would have a temp go through and pull up a folder from the box, make sure that all those permits were scanned, and then mark it, yes, 100% QC'd, and then move on to the next and move on to the next. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I believe it does. Thank you. Do you use a workflow to track or process your actual PRAs?
No, we don't. We use an Excel spreadsheet that has formulas and tracks everything, and I'm happy to share that if it's of interest. But we track our PRAs based on the complexity. We have 3 different tiers. The quick and easy ones are tier 1, and those are requests that we can fulfill up to 1 hour. Tier 2 are a little bit more complex. Perhaps we need to check with another department or some, just to verify that the information we have is complete and it captures everything that's being requested. Those are tier 2, and those would be requests that take longer than an hour, but up to 4 hours. And then we have tier 3, which would be anything above and beyond the 4-hour period. And that's how we track them. So we assign, when we log in the request, we assign it a tier once it's completed and how long it took us to complete that. And then we have formulas in Excel that capture that in a report format, which was extremely helpful because not too long ago, I was able to show that records requests have doubled over the last 2 years, and I was able to add a half a position to my department to help with that effort.
Thank you. That was a good answer. What percentage of public records requests are generally satisfied using the self-service portal?
90%.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes. I mean, we still have to respond to them, but the response is, here's the link, all the records are there, or here's how you search for it.
And Monica, just to be, I don't know if this person who asked this question wants to know this, but I think it's interesting. Because there's so much building in La Quinta, you tend to get a lot of, right, developers and, construction agencies and people who work with permits searching your system, and they tend to be pretty tech savvy, yes?
Yes. I mean, generally, once we show someone how the search form works, they tend to just use it and only contact us if they want like building plans or structural calculations, basically documents that are not available through the public portal, because again, we need to obtain approvals through them. So, we've never had a situation where we send them instructions and they were confused on how to use it. Does that answer?
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I
it's a
can't
good
speak
answer.
yeah, I can't speak to how computer savvy each individual person is because
Right,
obviously, I don't know them.
right.
But based on my experience in providing the responses and directing them to use WebLink, we've never had someone who said, oh no, I can't access this, or can I come and pick up paper copies? And another benefit of this is, the minimum amount of cost that you can recover by making copies of this, it takes basically, you're expending more resources in making the copies and preparing an invoice to charge a couple dollars when you can just send them a link and call it a day and there's no cost involved. So there's that as well.
Okay, and one final question. This is about the ongoing management of this. How is ongoing scanning of permits and plans happening, including the load into Laserfish?
Okay, so currently, a couple examples. So once we were caught up, we had a process with with the hub, basically with the permit technicians. Every month, they would give us a box with all permits that were issued for that month, because obviously we no longer have the filing room. And we are able to run a report through our permitting software that every permitting software now has metadata in it built in, right? So we were able to draw the building permit number and the address. Basically, those are our two main components that we're interested in. But obviously, we can run any information that's entered into the electronic software. And then using, Kim, I'm calling it quick fields, but you're calling it something else. You're calling it batch scanning.
Yeah, I mean, so there is
Okay.
a folder on the network drive and it's being monitored. So it's kind of batch capture because at that point,
Okay.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
it's using quick fields to apply the template data to the document.
Right. So we have a couple ways that we've achieved this. If the permits were issued electronically, they would be saved on a shared drive in the network. Then we can just take all of those PDF documents and transfer them into the incoming building permits folder that I showed earlier, and then provide the report database that we run through the permitting software to our CPS support. And they would upload that into the workflow, and then we would run the workflow, and those permits automatically get routed and put into the address folders. If the permits were issued in paper, then we would scan them, and we could either go through the process of renaming each permit and doing all that, which we didn't want to do. So we used quick fields because the permits look the same and in terms of the format.
Sure.
And the building permit number is always in the same field. Then quick field, instead of using the naming convention of the document to do the lookup and the transfer of workflow used the quick fields lookup to then take that permit number and then again match it to the database and do the transfer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, about 2/3 of CPS clients use quick fields to do database lookups, very similar to how Monica's is set up. It's really helpful, and it saves time. I mean, it's good stuff. So we've got one last question, Monica. Can you please share a little more about how you got the trusted system set up? What did it entail?
We went through 2 iterations of it. Initially, our Laserfish repository was in the cloud. So when we were initially looking for it, there were 3 different vendors, and whoever this person is, I know Kim is going to share my contact information after the webinar is over. So please email me and I'm happy to share with you the proposals that were received, and the research. It's been quite a few years, so I don't have all the details off the top of my head, but I'm happy to look into that folder and provide that information. But at the time, HubStore was the only one that was providing trusted backup to a repository that was in the cloud, and that was secured through Microsoft servers. Subsequently, about 2 years after that, the city switched its IT provider, and they recommended that we move the Laserfish repository from the cloud back to a server on premise. And then, so our backup is still in the cloud, but our actual repository is on premise. And the way our backup, it backs up daily, and if it's basically, it's non-rewritable, so every backup exists on its own. So let's say a document gets deleted today, but I know that the document was there 6 months ago. I can go to that backup 6 months ago and locate that document and draw it out.
That's a good.
Where,
yeah,
where you have like a standard network backup, it gets rewritten. So if you delete a document today and don't realize that it's been lost for 6 months, the backup that had it would have already been rewritten, and you would not be able to bring that document back.
Okay. Looks like that is it. And so far as questions go, thank you, Monica. That was really, really good. And I just wanted to note to the audience, have you ever seen such a pristine repository? Oh, we've got one more question. Monica, do you have just another 30 seconds?
Yes.
Is your public portal hosted on servers controlled by the city, CPS, or Laserfish?
It's through the city controls it,
So,
but CPS has access to it.
So is it in the cloud or is it on premise?
It's on premise.
Okay, I think that's what she was asking. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
all right.
It's on premise.
Okay. So, okay, great. Thank you, Monica. You were fantastic. And thank you, Jamie. And thank you to our audience. We appreciate you being here. Just one more reminder, we have recorded this webinar and we'll post it to our website, cps247.com. By end of day Friday, but you'll get an email from me with the link and Monica's contact information. So if you want that Excel spreadsheet or you have any other questions, she has very graciously volunteered to be a resource. Thanks again for making time to join us today. Have a great July 4th, and we will see you on the next webinar.